Good morning, welcome to Headline Focus here, live on Core Politics with me, Rob Double. It is Wednesday the 28th of March 2018. Let's have a look at what's making the political news today. So to start off with, new hospitals every year. Now that's a pledge by the government as part of a 10-year funding settlement for the NHS. To mark its 70th birthday this coming summer. The NHS has been promised by the government a new hospital every year for the next 5 years in what it's been reported as the biggest infrastructure expansion for a decade. Now, this is part of a £3.5 billion infrastructure capital amount promised by the Chancellor Philip Hammond in last year's budget. So as you can see there, a huge domestic announcement in terms of the government's domestic agenda today, particularly in terms of the NHS, which was such a political issue during the election last year. So really interesting stuff. £3.5 billion, obviously a significant amount as well. And perhaps a movement away from the Conservative policy since 2010, which has been, of course, an austerity government, a government of clamping down on the budgets and not making those kind of massive investments into projects. Next up, plastic disposable clampdown. And this has caught the eye of the media today. You'll see it in a lot of papers, particularly on the Nationals, also in news feeds as well. Michael Gove, the Environment Secretary, has delivered another radical proposal. This time is for a refundable deposit scheme for disposable drinks, cans and bottles. Now, a consultation is being launched today by the government, but it's certainly an indication of where the government wants to go in terms of clamping down on plastic, which really has become at the forefront of the public's agenda this year, particularly after the BBC Blue Planet series and the implications of plastic waste, which was seen on there. All single-use drink containers, pretty much from any material, so whether plastic or tin or metal or whatever, could be subject to an upfront charge of up to 20p, and that could then be refundable by the customer on the return of that single-use container to whatever kind of retailer, the retailer you bought it from, or a collection point, or something like that. Designed to lay the ground for next month's Commonwealth Summit in London, which will focus on plastic recycling as a major theme. The Commonwealth, of course, an organisation which is hoping to become far more in the forefront of the UK's trading policy, but also political agenda as well, post-Brexit, when we start looking towards that global Britain strategy internationally, rather than just focusing on the European regional area. Finally, one more story. Prepare for fight in space. Now, the head of the Royal Air Force, Air Chief Marshal Sir Stephen Hillier, said Britain's armed forces must be ready to fight states such as Russia in space. Now, what did he mean by that? He said that if Moscow, he didn't say there's going to be war in space or any kind of Star Wars stuff like that, but he said that if Moscow were willing to launch a chemical weapons attack on Salisbury, as has been alleged, indeed the government says is proven, earlier this month, it could defy international rules against using cyber attacks, laser beams or jamming devices to destroy valuable satellites in orbit as well. So clamping down on the capabilities, particularly in terms of space infrastructure of allies or enemies of Russia. He said, I can see us being contested for use of space and for people trying to deny us some of our specific capabilities. Now, the government today publishes a plan to counter modern Russian warfare, including propaganda on social media and stuff like this. The RAF is also doubling the size of its space operations from RAF High Wycombe as well. So, again, a really interesting area which is expanding in terms of UK government policy. And again, defence, an area which over the past few years has been there's been a concern about the amount of cuts which has happened to its budget. As you can see here, some more money being ploughed into not only chemical weapons research, but also some of these new frontier conflict areas as well. That's pretty much it for today. You're up to date. Don't forget you can find all the latest on what we're doing here on Core Politics on our Facebook page and Twitter right here. But from me and all the team here at Core London, have a fantastic start to your Wednesday.